Do the languages we speak shape the way we think? Do they merely express thoughts, or do the structures in languages, without our knowledge or consent, shape the very thoughts we wish to express? Take Humpty Dumpty sat on a... Even this snippet of a nursery rhyme reveals how much languages can differ from one another. In English, we have to mark the verb for tense. In this case, we say sat rather than sit. In Indonesian, you need not, in fact you can't, change the verb to mark tense. In Russian, you would have to mark tense and also gender, changing the verb if Mrs. Dumpty did the sitting. You would also have to decide if the sitting event was completed or not. If our ovoid hero sat on the wall for the entire time he was meant to, it would be a different form of the verb than if, say, he had a great fall. In Turkish, you would have to include in the verb how you acquired this information. For example, if you saw the chubby fellow on the wall with your own eyes, you'd use one form of the verb, but if you had simply read or heard about it, you'd use a different form. Do English, Indonesian, Russian, and Turkish speakers end up attending to, understanding, and remembering their experiences differently simply because they speak different languages? These questions touch on all the major controversies in the study of mind, with important implications for politics, law, and religion. Yet very little empirical work had been done on these questions until recently. The idea that language might shape thought was for a long time considered untestable at best, and more often simply crazy and wrong. Now, a flurry of new cognitive science research is showing that, in fact, language does profoundly influence how we see the world. The question of whether languages shape the way we think goes back centuries. Charlemagne proclaimed that to have a second language is to have a second soul. But the idea went out of favor with scientists when Noam Chomsky's theories of language gained popularity in the 1960s and 70s. Dr. Chomsky proposed that there is a universal grammar for all human languages, essentially that languages don't really differ from one another in significant ways. And because languages didn't differ from one another, the theory went, it made no sense to ask whether linguistic differences led to differences in thinking. The search for linguistic universals yielded interesting data on languages, but after decades of work, not a single proposed universal has withstood scrutiny. Instead, as linguists probed deeper into the world's languages, 7,000 or so, only a fraction of them analyzed, innumerable unpredictable differences emerged. Of course, just because people talk differently doesn't necessarily mean they think differently. In the past decade, cognitive scientists have begun to measure not just how people talk, but also how they think, asking whether our understanding of even such fundamental domains of experience as space, time, and causality could be constructed by language. For example, in Pormpuraaw, a remote Aboriginal community in Australia, the indigenous languages don't use terms like left and right. Instead, everything is talked about in terms of absolute cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, which means you say things like, "There's an ant on your southwest leg." To say hello in Pormpuraaw, one asks, "Where are you going?" And an appropriate response might be, "A long way to the south-southwest. How about you?" If you don't know which way is which, you literally can't get past hello. About a third of the world's languages, spoken in all kinds of physical environments, rely on absolute directions for space. As a result of this constant linguistic training, speakers of such languages are remarkably good at staying oriented and keeping track of where they are, even in unfamiliar landscapes. They perform navigational feats scientists once thought were beyond human capabilities. This is a big difference, a fundamentally different way of conceptualizing space, trained by language.